Ready? You guys want to see the damage this time? It's gonna be way better. This is my Eye of Winter Comet cast on Critical Strike Invoker. And it's got about 30 hours played, and it's hitting one of the highest DPS numbers that I've seen in the game as far as non-bugged builds go. Hitting roughly 250k DPS, and it's got a decent defensive shell, but it's got a long way to go. Offensively, it's really simple. I just press one single button, Eye of Winter, and then I have Cast on Critical linked with Comet. Because Eye of Winter hits so many times and also applies a critical strike debuff, giving me up to 10% base crit, I'm really easily able to kind of cap out my Comet procs, where my bottleneck now is on mana for single target. Defensively, it is an ES and evasion hybrid setup, although I do want to get much more ES than this still. And it also runs Eternal Youth for recovery, so rather than relying on ES Recharge or Ghost Shrouds, I actually use my Life Flask to recover Energy Shield. So if you want to play a build that's the closest thing to a PoE 1 build as far as being straight up one button and being fairly smooth with good enough single target, it's a pretty good shot at emulating things. I'm pretty happy with where this is at right now, and I can't wait to bring it into the deep endgame. So as far as PoE 2 builds go, I'll be uploading most of them. As far as the really fleshed out ones go on Mobalytics, I'm really happy with kind of what they've done, and we've made a really strong team, I think, with pretty much most of the top PoE 1 players on the squad. I think just having written form for guides is really efficient. So yeah, this is a summary, and let's go with equipment first. So I've only put it 3 pieces. The first is the Threaded Light Shield. It scales spell damage based on your spirit. So for every, I think, 10 spirit you have, it gives you 12% increased spell damage. At 200, which is what I have, it gives you 240 increased spell damage, which is crazy. It's kind of like Wrathpith Glove for PoE 1. 240 increased spell damage. Most of my increased damage comes from this slot alone. On the weapon, this is sort of the ideal weapon. The spell damage is less important, but I'm looking for plus level to gems mostly, 2 of the crit mods, and then I really like having that damage as extra lightning damage, because I have massive hits from my Comet, and then when I convert that to lightning damage, it can actually shock on bosses. And I don't care about which element it is, because I don't have that much cold damage scaling on the tree, and I'm also using, what's that node called? Sunder. My enemies, right. The thing that allows your critical hits to ignore enemy res. So that damage added as lightning is pretty much just as good as damage added as cold, except it also lets you shock, which is really great. The rest of my gear slots are all evasion and ES, which are, you know, just pretty straightforward, except for the helmet, which wants to be pure energy shield. That's to synergize with one of the nodes on the tree that I'll be looking to grab later on in progression. The belts, I just want to highlight that I prefer utility belt here. The implicit, it allows you to have instant flask recovery. This doesn't come at any sort of downside or penalty to the rest of your flasks. So that's really, really cool. The skill gem setup so far is relatively simple. It's Eye of Winter with Inspiration, Arcane Surge, and Arcane Tempo, Comet with Cast on Crit, Comet, Spell Echo, and Energy Retention. And then I run a Blasphemy Temporal Chain setup with Ritualistic and Clarity, and then finally Lingering Illusion, because I got some leftover spirit right now. As I push my chest into what's closer to a perfect, at least prefix chest for endgame, it'll give me at least 30 flat more spirit. And this will allow for 2 options. Firstly, I could go for a dual curse, Blasphemy, Temp Chains, and Feeble, and that would fit. The second option that I'm thinking about going is for dropping Lingering Illusion also in that setup, and playing Blink. I'm not sure how good that's gonna feel. I haven't played with that skill at all, but it's just sort of what I'm thinking for the future. But yeah, that's it. This is a really simple skill gem setup. Other things I would continue to add potentially are Ball Lightning linked with Lightning Warp, or rather side by side, because that actually gives you a movement skill that can traverse ground effects and just, like, you know, kind of move faster. But that's that. As far as the skill tree goes, it's actually fairly straightforward. It's very, very shadow centric, so it's just right here. You can look over the tree itself, but I'll go over what I'm planning to do in the future. I think what I really want to do eventually is get over down here, and then take these nodes for mental toughness, which will help out with your mana sustain a lot. And then also grab this, Subterfuge Mask, which gives you just quite a bit more evasion as you get a really strong ES helmet. Hail Traveler is also really strong. Normally I wouldn't care about this on a CI build, right? Because I only have Energy Shield, but because I'm taking Eternal Youth, which allows my life flasks to apply my ES, this cluster is actually really, really valuable and actually helps out my recovery a ton. But yeah, I think that's the build. As far as other questions go, I know that a lot of people have been asking me about kind of these things, so I put some FAQ down here. And this is sort of the big one. Can you play this on other classes? And the answer is, I mean, probably, yeah. But you will need to pay attention to how much energy you generate. The way that Cast on Crit works is that you get energy, whatever amount, based on kind of the nodes on the tree that give you energy, things like this, or things like this. And there's also a support gem. And you want that number to be close to one of these intervals and always equal to or over one of these intervals, but not close to and under. And it's basically because as soon as you hit 100 on energy, you'll spend all that energy to cast on crit, whatever spell you have linked. But any sort of excess energy you would have generated on that last hit, that doesn't add up to anything extra. You just start back at 0 again. So that's something to pay attention to as you set that up for yourself. But yeah, I think this is a pretty straightforward build. Nothing like super buggy going on, but I think one of the strongest offensive outputs that I've seen so far. So I hope that it'll kind of evade all the nerfs from grinding gear games as far as like, you know, the sort of unintended and bugged builds go.